Alright, hey everyone, this is Delta 7 from D13 Airsoft. I wanted to do a quick review on my IFAK system. I use my load bearing rig. So this is my primary rig I use for airsoft and real steel. You can't see most of it because it's zoomed in focusing on this, which is the main topic of the video. This is a Warrior Assault System personal medical pouch. As the verbiage for it essentially is their medium-sized medical rig they have. They have smaller ones, they have some very large ones. This is kind of the medium one, and it is a tear away pouch. How this works is I have added this paracord to it to make it easier to grip, especially in the winter time. You have to have thicker gloves on, so it's helped to grab this. But you have this little tab here. You pull it. I tuck it outside of the handle and I rip. What that means is with one hand I can pull this off and get access to it while still having it in a convenient and out of the way place to prioritize having other equipment closer up front. Again, the whole back is Velcro. There is a MOLLE compatible plate, or nylon plate, air quote, that comes with it that you then MOLLE attach to your belt rig or whatever MOLLE compatible equipment you have. I think it's supposed to be for 3 MOLLE slots long, or MOLLE cells, but I'm able to cram it onto 2. And it works quite well even like that. Now, what comes on the front of it is you have a pre-sewed medical cross on it to identify, hey, this is an IFAK without being too bright, which is nice. I have 2 pieces of Velcro I have super glued onto here so I can identify my blood type and allergies that I have. This does not come with it, though. This simple modification seems to have worked quite well and still has retained on here for at least 6 to 8 months. The pouch itself I've used for at least a year and a half, I think getting close to 2 years now, and it is still in very good conditions. So opening this up, you have 2 zippers. You get inside. Starting on my right, your left, is a dragster. So I don't remember what company makes this, but idea behind this is you have 2 carabiners attached at 2 ends of some sturdy nylon. Looks like they just had some spare 1-inch multicam MOLLE nylon that they had. And the idea behind this is one you clip to your own rig somewhere, and the other you clip onto the rig or belt line of the Casualty. Idea is you return fire, put the tourniquet on the Casualty, and then you get them out of there before you address the rest of the medical issues that they are having. In a situation like that, it's very helpful to have something like this, though not mandatory, so that instead of having to use one or both of your arms to carry and drag that person, you can now, in theory, do it without using any of your arms, so that you can then, say, still carry equipment, hold your rifle, return fire if need be, etc. So, this is not mandatory, but this is pretty nifty. There's quite a few different products out there that serve a similar purpose. So just look around for dragster or Casualty carry strap or something like that. Or you could probably just make something yourself with some spare nylon and carabiners. Again, not mandatory, but pretty cool. Alright, something that is mandatory. Tourniquet. Make sure you have at least one. With that said, if you can, I highly recommend having more than that. I have 2 in here. I also have another one in my cargo pocket usually, and quite a few other places near me if need be. So always have at least minimum 1. Really, I think a lot of guys are carrying more than 1 now because they realize, 1, if your tourniquet fails on you, you're going to be up a certain creek without a paddle. It'll be a lot of trouble. 2, even if 1 is still working, it may not be enough to actually stop the bleeding by itself, depending on what part of the body it's on. So it's good just to have that second to help out. So I have 1 and a second here. Make sure you have them in here. At least 1's mandatory, guys. Next up, and I would say this is also mandatory, is a decompression needle. It is still sealed. The expiration date's still good on it, though. Still inspect those, make sure it's good. I recently had a decompression needle in a different rig I was using with the seal busted. Don't know how it happened, but this is why you inspect your equipment, make sure it's still good. But yes, absolutely mandatory. Use this, have it on you. Sharpie. Idea is having a writing utensil. As you see through here, I have a lot of laminated equipment in here, plus just writing on the tourniquets for the time or whatnot. You want to have something to write on, and if you have your pen, pencil, paper somewhere else, you may lose it or not have it and access, or you may just forget about it in the panic of having to use this. So just have something in here as well. You can get some smaller Sharpies and whatnot, save some weight, but I have one in here, so use that. Something that is also mandatory is a NPA, or a nose tube as they're called. The idea is you stick it down the nose to make sure the person can still breathe. The lungs start to collapse on them, and no way it gets stuck with something like blood. Point being, I got it. Also has the lube with it, so it's easier to get in there. Alright. Moving on this side, we have some Celox gauze. Essentially, it's combat gauze, as they're called. The idea is it is gauze that you often use to pack wounds. It also has a certain chemical in it that helps clot blood faster. So it helps stop you flowing blood faster, helps plug up the wound, with also in conjunction with it physically being gauze that helps pack wounds. So it's a really awesome thing to have. Highly recommend investing in at least one of these. This next one isn't necessarily mandatory, but it is an awesome thing to have. Again, this by itself is not that thick. It's quite small and compact, so it's cool to have. It's essentially blood clot, so that same chemical that I talked about before with the combat gauze, this is in a powder form. So you pour it onto the wound before using a bandage or gauze of some type that doesn't have it. Again, it's not mandatory by itself, but it really does help if you can integrate it. So it's a good thing to have, and I highly recommend it. Something that is mandatory is your chest seal. I have 1, 2, 3, and 4. So, the idea is most of these pre-built IFAKs you can find that have the medical stuff, sometimes they'll only give you 1 chest seal for some odd reason. And then most guys in combat and law enforcement, at least here in the US, are usually issued and mandated to have 2 chest seals. The idea behind that is if there is an entry wound, there is an exit wound, thus the need for a second chest seal. The reason I have 4 is because in today's day and age, most people in the shooting community, at least here in the US, are taught to either A, in the Hollywood terms, double tap, meaning you shoot at least twice, or quite frankly just shoot until this target stops moving. So the idea is, well, if you're going to get hit, you're probably going to have more than 1 hole in you. So if that's the case, it might be good to have more than 2 chest seals. Obviously, if you could, pack it as many as you can, but really, you know, size, weight, you got to compromise somewhere. So I chose 4. Still give you a little more of an edge on this than you might see in other IFAKs at the cost of a little more size and weight, which is why I have a larger pouch like this. Moving on, I have a trauma dressing that's 4 inches long. That's also colloquially called the Israeli bandage. The idea is a certain special type of bandage you put on that has a plastic handle and hook that helps you seal the bandage up when it's finished being used without having to stop applying pressure. Pretty good to have, definitely mandated to have in my opinion. It's just a really good piece of kit to have. Again, this is the 4-inch one. You can also find the abdominal versions or the 6-inch versions, which are usually around 6 inches. And I mean, they're a great kit to have. And again, that's a compromise with the 4-inch for this size. Again, you can get some bigger ones. With the combat gauze that I already mentioned before, this isn't mandatory, but it's another good thing to have. This is often a standard issue for a lot of guys and also bought in a lot of medical kits you can find online. This is a NAR compressed gauze, so again, it's just gauze that you can usually use to pack wounds, or you put that first layer on before you really put the Israeli bandage on. Medical tape, I would pretty much say this is mandatory. The idea is most of the bandages we're seeing that goes on the outer layer of a wound, a lot of them are self-sealing these days or have a way you can keep the pressure down, but you never know what's going to happen. I know the NPAs and those tubes, you also need some tape, so it's good just to have some tape on you, have it with you. Two chem lights, not mandatory. The idea is these chem lights is, hey, I need a way to mark a casualty site, or I need a way to flag down in a real world emergency that, hey, someone is injured. I can use this. They're both red, which is usually synonymous with a medical emergency oftentimes. Again, there's a time and place for them. In a tactical environment, you may not want to do to certain situations, but it is a good tool to have if you can pack it in here it's good to have, but again, not mandatory. Moving on to my small Ziploc bag for a boo-boo kit along with some other stuff. If you notice the bag is broken right now, I need to replace it. I actually had to open up and use this IFAK to get something in here during a airsoft game recently to help out a teammate who got injured. So again, small world, but I have used this in a certain way and at the cost of a Ziploc bag. So used it once, got to replace it. Inspect your equipment. First off, there's some cough drops because having a sore throat out in the field absolutely sucks. So have them, it helps for a little while. I have a whole very assorted size of Band-Aids in here. So I got quite a few in here because you often use them. So, and quite frankly, a lot of guys have these IFAKs. They forget something as simple as a Band-Aid. Instead of pulling out some medical tape and a gauze pad, I can just give them one of mine. I mean, it helps. Not mandatory to an IFAK, though it is where I keep them, are water purification tablets. So the idea is if you run out of water and you're in a real world emergency or a tactical situation where you would say, hey, go off the land, find a creek or water, just any water to find to fill it up. Probably don't want to just drink it by itself. You don't know what's in that water. You haven't had time to boil the water and purify it. So these NATO standard purification tablets you can find online anywhere in dozens to 100 packs pretty cheaply. They're great to have. Got quite a few of them in here. Idea is fill it up a 1 liter canteen, toss 2 of these in here, wait a minimum of 30 minutes, shake it up, and in theory it can help mitigate a lot of the contaminants in that water. Again, boil it if you can, but it's cool to have these. It's great to have them. I have them in other places, but I just toss them in here because it just adds space. You don't have to get to it quick, but it's not mandatory for an IFAK. Also not mandatory, though it is neat to have, is some stitches. I mean, these do have needles with them, and God help me if I ever have to use this in the field, but you got them. I mean, that's nice to have. Most IFAKs just don't have these at all. Not mandatory, but it's good to have. So. We have 2 smaller just gauze pads. The idea is if a Band-Aid's not big enough, but you don't want to crack out everything else, you can use this to put on the wound with some medical tape so that you make a smaller bandage before you move up to the next thing. Save some resources. I have some small and very cheap foldable medical scissors. Idea is if you use a pocket knife or a fixed blade that you have on other parts of your kit to cut bandages or clothing on a victim, you could potentially puncture past that and injure them more, which you don't want to do. So having something small like this is good, though you notice the tip of it's still quite sharp, so maybe investing in some medical shears would be a better investment, though it's hard to find them in this compact of a size. So that was the compromise I had for it and why I got these. Moleskin, just got 2 sheets of it. You can be walking around a lot, sometimes you need it, so it's good to have them. And then on the other side of this small laminated sheet of paper is some personal information of mine, including social security number, allergies, next of kin, personal contact information. Essentially a substitute for an ID card if they can't find that. And of course I'm not going to show that, but the idea is, hey, if I'm unconscious, I can't tell them that information, they can just grab this and get it from me. Then lastly is some laminated paperwork I got in here. So I opened this up, I got 3 pieces. First one is this very small, compact, but still usable skeleton for a 9-line medevac by NATO standard. They change this every so often, but it largely stays the same with the general format. If you use this format over a radio or on the phone to contact someone, they're generally going to understand how that works, and it can potentially help save a life. It gives the medical team information before they SP so that they know, what they're getting into and further prepare themselves. So, important to give. Next up is a Tactical Combat Casualty Care card, or TCCC card. This is issued out to personnel in the United States military, but it's really good to have as civilians as well. Idea is you fill out this information for the casualty. In this case, it would be for me if it was being used on me. to ensure that certain information is being told when they hand me off to someone else, probably a medic or medical personnel. Idea is you fill this out, you can hand it to them so you don't have to be there to back brief them, and you can go help other people. So really good tool to have. There's plenty of places online that show you line by line how to fill this out, so I do strongly recommend looking at those. And lastly, when in the Army, I learned a thing or two during a CLS class where they actually gave me this handout for the MARCH acronym for Combat Life Savings. It goes through a very brief step-by-step process on evacuation and casualty, returning fire, getting them out of there, and then beginning the MARCH process. So I had some typed out notes plus some hand jam notes in there to also help me out with some extra details. Idea is, if you're saving someone's life, there's no such thing as a cheat sheet, so use what you have. So if you can't remember this off memory, which a lot of people can't, good. You can have a piece of paper like this in here, and you just check the list as you go on to make sure you don't miss a step. And likewise, I don't know who's going to come save me if I'm injured. I may not be conscious enough to help. It's good to have information like this in here. So again, I was able to pack a lot in this pouch. As you can see inside, we have very similar duplicates on each side. You have a back row, then you have these two slots here, and you have these notches here for loops if you want to add some more stuff, and it's double on each side. Again, this is the Warrior Assault System medical personal IFAK, excuse me, and yeah, I mean, it's been great. I've used it a lot, and I've had good use with it. Still quite durable, still in good condition. It can hold a lot while still not being more than 2 MOLLE cell size wide if you cram down that MOLLE compatible Velcro panel that comes with this. So it really does work great, and I would highly recommend it. So, alright, thanks guys for watching, and if you got any input for any of this, feel free to hit me up in the comments or find me and D13 Airsoft online on various social media platforms. Thanks guys. Bye.